Hey guys, this is ADWCTA, and this is the Whispers of the Old Gods card review. We are on to Shaman. It should be to nobody's surprise if you're just looking at the cards that Shaman is going to get the biggest bump with the Whispers of the Old Gods because it has the best cards for the Whispers of the Old Gods. But not only that, Shaman's gameplay actually works really well for what the Whispers of the Old Gods is going to do. It's not the only class that it works well for, but it is one of them. Because totems are very much late game cards. You need to be able to, well, there are two things. One, in the late game, totems are ridiculous, right? It's automatic heal everything on your board once every turn, always having spell damage, always having a taunt, and always having a 1/1 body to throw around. You're not going to get better than that. It is, if you have the board in the late game, it is as good as a priest's hero power. Now, earlier in the game, whereas a priest needs a minion on the board and then healing it, a shaman just needs the opponent to not be able to hit things. So, no one's going to use a removal on a totem. So as long as your opponent doesn't have enough attacks to clear your totems will stay alive because they can't even ping it down if they want to. And that happens more often when the game puts out less tempo on the board. And with these taunts, it kind of favors a game in which you are more capable of playing a little bit off the board. So maybe a few more decks are going to do that. Maybe 5-10% more decks are going to do that. And that'll all favor the shaman in terms of being able to get some totems going without just having the totems die. Also, all totems are taunt totems, right? Like, unless your opponent has lethal, which means the shaman already has an excellent way to protect its face. So now the shaman can basically just guarantee to get to the late game. And why is the late game so good for the shaman, right? Besides just the hero power, you also have the top shaman cards basically across the board be better for the late game and or big, huge, ridiculous cards, right? Hex silences and gets rid of anything. So big minion problem solved. Fire Elemental. It's a 6/5 body, which is worth 5 mana, combined with dealing 3 damage, which is worth 3 mana. So that is a 8 mana card. So yeah, it's 6 mana, and that makes it pretty good for tempo too. But it doesn't change the fact that card advantage wise, like big size wise, it's an 8 mana class card. That's ridiculous. 8 mana size class card. And on top of that, but what's the other good card? Flameguard Totem. Flametongue Totem. Flameguard Destroyer is the other card, but okay. Flametongue Totem. What happens? In the late game, you have infinite, like as long as it doesn't get removed, you have infinite damage coming out, plus 2 damage per turn. It's incredible. It's like infinite size. And then Flameguard Destroyer, obviously, is a 6 health minion that could potentially also get a lot of attack. So, just a lot of Shaman cards are actually really big. We don't feel it for some reason. Like, I don't think of Shaman, I think, oh yeah, huge big things. But that is what they have. And that's kind of what they've always had. They've just always had really good card advantage. And the card advantage doesn't cost them tempo the same way that it does for a lot of other cards. And that was one of the reasons why Shaman was really good in Classic, right? Now, as we're thinking that the game is going to slow down a little, everyone's going to curve out a little less more, and everything's going to be a little more on the board, we get closer and closer to the Classic meta. And in the Classic meta, what was one of the top classes? Shaman. Now, Shaman arguably has the card quality back to where it was in Classic, and the Classic cards are still there. So it's just incredibly good things are happening to the Shaman. Oh, even better, LOE gave Shaman pretty much nothing. You got like a Tunnel Trog. The fact that Tunnel Trog's offering rate will be lowered will not be missed very heavily. And as 1-drops get worse, it really won't be missed very heavily. And so now we look at Shaman cards. The first thing we're going to look at is what we were just talking about, right? Shamans have big things. It used to be the case before this that Warlocks probably had the biggest things, but Shaman is now giving it a run for its money. And back in Classic, obviously, Druid had the biggest things, but then Druid didn't get another big thing. Ever. So I'm not sure what happened there with Blizzard, but now it's definitely Warlocks have the big things, and now Shamans are going to have the big things. And the biggest thing, the first big thing, the thing that everybody will focus on is a Flame-Wreathed Faceless. I'm not going to say that word again. FF, we're going to call it FF. FF is a 4 mana 7/7 with overload of 2. This marks the first time in the entire game that I can think of where overloaded mana is treated as being more valuable than mana you spend now. Because 6 mana, you don't get a 7/7 for 6 mana, you get a 6/7 for 6 mana. Maybe with like a little ability attached onto it, but we haven't even seen that so far. So it's a 7/7 for 6 mana. And if you're thinking about the overload, we'll talk a little bit about how overload is calculated here. It usually was the case back in the day when Blizzard first released Classic, where they thought, well, overload lets you tempo out more. Tempoing out more allows you to control the board more, and so even if we penalize you on the next turn, it's still better to borrow mana for the future, right? It's almost like interest income on like money, right? That's what like the banks give you. And that's why when you borrow money from whether it's a credit card or a bank, they're going to charge you interest on it. It's because having stuff now to do stuff with is better than waiting to have stuff later if it's the same amount of stuff, so you have to pay a little for it. Apparently that principle doesn't work in Hearthstone, and I think Blizzard figured this out as they're just like, why is Shaman not competitive? Why is Shaman not competitive? They have all these cards that are in theory very good. And it was because in Hearthstone, not being able to use all of your mana on one turn, not only, like, you do get a little benefit in getting it out earlier, but you also have a penalty, and then the next turn you can't play something for 5 mana. You can't play something for 6 mana. So all your cards that are bigger than that effectively get delayed an extra turn, and that's like a huge deal. It really makes everything a lot more awkward. So I think Blizzard's starting to come around to that, where now overload is being treated as kind of like just regular mana, right, at best. Anyway, before people go crazy over Flame Wreath Faceless is the best card ever, it's a stat stick, right? It's a 7/7 stat stick. We've seen something like it. Flameguard Destroyer is a 4.5 attack, 6 mana thing that has some RNG to it, so it's not as reliable, but it overloads for 1 less. So if you just treat overload as regular mana, you get 1 extra health here, which is good. You get 1 extra attack here, which is good. And then you get 0.5 bonus attack, and you get rid of the RNG, which is good. But again, not game breaking, right? Like when this card gets rated, it will be a very good card because Flameguard Destroyer is a very good card, but we're not talking about a super premium card, right? Fire Elemental, Hex, totally safe. This is just another good big thing that Shaman has, which is nice. In the rare side, there are 2 big things that the Shaman has. Thing from Below and Master of Evolution. Thing from Below costs 1 less for each totem you've summoned this game. Like I said, it's going to be a little easier to squeeze totems in, and then later on in the game you'll want to summon extra totems if you have the board, just because it's really good in the late game. So Thing from Below is one of those cards that's going to cost a lot less than 6 mana. It's going to cost less than 5 mana even. It's going to be a very good value. And you can compare it with Nerubian Prophet, right? Nerubian Prophet, if you top deck it or something, like you still have to hold it in your hand. So yes, you don't have the hero power for Nerubian Prophet's cost to come down, but just in the normal course of the game, Thing from Below will more likely to be more heavily undercosted than Nerubian Prophet, and it'll be less awkward regardless. And Thing from Below has a taunt, which means it has some initiative coming in. It's not the active initiative you want, but it does change the initiative math on the board. And that is something that's very valuable, especially if you're potentially behind. So the comparison we also made was with Frost Giant. Frost Giant takes 2 hero powers to get to a 8 mana 8/8. Thing from Below, if you do 2 hero powers, it's a 4 mana 5/5 taunt. So it's way better in terms of the tempo in the whenever you play it. It's just an overall very good card. Again, it's not so premium because of when it comes out, and it is only a 5/5, and that's very good, but it's not like ridiculously huge. So it comes out in the late game, and by the late game you're really just looking at it for its stats, and it's only a little bigger than your average minion. So it's good. It's not game breakingly good, but definitely helping the Shaman. And Master of Evolution is like Super Yeti, right? If you transform your own friendly minion that hasn't been damaged, it's still okay. And then if you transform a minion that has been damaged, oh my god, right? Or a minion that used its battle cry already, it's kind of ridiculous. So Master of Evolution is going to be a very good card. As I have looked more and more at this card, I like it more and more. So I think Master of Evolution is going to be one of those premium Shaman cards that gets quite a bit more points than I had initially thought. But regardless, just big things, right? Even Master of Evolution, 4/5, it's not a small thing. And the Shaman is well equipped to enter into this meta. Okay, so let's talk about the Overload. So we already talked about Flame Wreath Faceless, how Overload was recalculated. The next card is a common card, Stormcrack. 2 mana, 4 damage, Overload 1. Basically, that's a Shadow Bolt. It's a little better than a Shadow Bolt in that your totems can give you plus spell damage, and that's not a thing when it comes to the Warlock, but it's also a little worse than a Shadow Bolt, because if you're a Warlock, you can hero power to get more cards, and 4 damage is fine, but it's like a tiny bit smaller than you want. So, I don't know. I think it's okay. We'll probably have the exact same score as whatever the hell Shadow Bolt is right now. And it's good. At first I saw it, I was like, wow, it's going to totally break Constructed. You have Crackle, you have Stormcrack, you have like Lightning Bolts, and then I realized you don't have Crackle anymore in Constructed Standard. So that's why Stormcrack is coming out. It's very good though, right? No RNG. No RNG is always welcome. So I think it's interesting, right? You look at Stormcrack and then you look at Crackle. I think Stormcrack is a better card. Like, the potential to deal 2 more damage and the ability to go face doesn't actually make Crackle, in the arena at least, it doesn't actually make Crackle better than just like this consistent one damage. It's really interesting how much RNG hurts you when you're a good player. Because on the average, right, like, Crackle's way better. Okay, next we are going to look at the Eternal Sentinel, which, just because it's overloading, it's an epic card, you're not going to see it all that much, but it unlocks your overload nanocrystals. This is what I like, right? I like the flavor of overload. It's a very unique Shaman thing. It's not good, but it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be unique. In the game design space, right? If you can make something and you make it unique, it doesn't need to be good or bad. In fact, it's probably worse if it is better, because then you have a balance problem. So creating just differences where it doesn't make a value-wise difference, but it does make a playstyle difference, that's a huge thing. And Overload is always one of the Shaman's unique things. It's something that you actually have to figure out when you play Shaman for the first time, where you get totally screwed. And that thing isn't really apparent in almost any other class. There's no mechanic for other classes that are the equivalent to how punishing Overload is if you don't know what it does. So the fact that we have these unlock your overloaded mana crystals cards coming out now is very good. I wish Blizzard does more overload synergies. I think the arena will be much more fun with them. Okay, so now we're going to move on to some cards we haven't covered yet. Primal Fusion, +1/+1 to 1 minion for each totem that you get. You're going to totem kind of naturally in the course of the game, so it's not like too awful, but +1/+1 is not that good. You're not really going to have 2 totems at any time until you've already pretty much won the game, and even then, like, you've set it all up, right, and then you get a +2/+2. So it's definitely not a good card. You take a 2-drop over it. You could run away with it, right? You get to the late game, you get your 4 totems out, you have 1 more totem on the board from, you know, whatever else you're playing, and then you get a +5/+5 for 1 mana. But this is balanced, right? This is not, like, I'm going to call it Blessing of Strength. I know the card is called something else, but I'm going to call it Blessing of Strength. So Blessing of Strength for Paladin, that's just 1 mana +1/+2, and it is just so much incredibly better. It's like a combo card. And you can't set up these combos in the arena all that easily. Hey, cutting in here. This is night ADWCTA on the same night that I recorded the earlier part of this. And I'm coming in here because I realized I totally screwed up one card. This next card, Evolve. And I screwed it up because I read it and I thought it said transform your minion into a random minion that costs 1 more. Instead of transform essentially all your minions into random minions that cost 1 more. So its power is now multiplied by the number of minions that are on the board. So I had said things like, this is not that great, you don't have initiative on it, you could like synergize it with a battle cry or use it effectively as a heal, but you know, at the end of the day, it's just gonna be a slightly worse than average card. That's not right. This card is ridiculous. This card was so ridiculous that I actually read it and my mind could not comprehend what it said, and it made up words and I put it into the card to make it make sense. Transforming all of your minions into random minions that cost 1 more is ridiculous. You almost never lose anything when you transform it into a minion that's 1 more. It essentially heals all the minions you have on the board. Anything with a battle cry gets buffed. You can play stuff with battle cries before you drop this minion. You can hero power a totem and it will turn into a 2 mana card. Because totems cost 1 mana, like the card, the totem costs 1 mana. This is absolutely insane if you have like any kind of board whatsoever, like if you're fighting for the board. And with Whispers of the Old Gods, and it's a kind of a slower thing, board trading thing, you'll probably be fighting for the board a lot. So I would say if you play this card in like the mid game even, not even like the late game, because if it's like a win more card, you don't really care at that point. You've already won. Evolve isn't doing anything for you. You probably don't want to like waste it even. But if you are like fighting for the board-ish and you have like a minion left on the board, and then you drop another minion, hero power, and then play evolve, or even 2 minions and play evolve, or a minion and a hero power and play evolve, you get the evolve power times 3. I thought an evolve power times 1 would be worth something like a 40, maybe a 30 something. Well, now you're getting on average like 2 to 3 times that effect. Probably more like 3 times that effect. That's insane. This is an insane card. I just looked at it. I don't know how I'm rating it exactly, but like it's really good. It's better than Yeti. It's definitely just insanely good. And whatever I say after this about the Shaman, just pretend I'm even more excited about the Shaman. I'll let regular ADWCTA take this over now. Hammer of Twilight, kind of the last card to cover. We went over this before. I was talking about the real importance of the fact that it does not deal 5 damage on turn 5, but 4 damage. Being off curve for a weapon is almost as bad as being off curve for a minion. So that's why Assassin's Blade is not an insanely amazing card when it should be, because it's 5 mana for 12 damage. This is 5 mana for 8 damage, but you also get another 4/2 elemental on the board on your second turn. So you've pushed some of the tempo up a bit, even though your elemental can't attack until your third turn. It's all kind of still delayed, but it's better than Assassin's Blade because it's 4 instead of 3, and it's better than Assassin's Blade because you can still use your hero power. But other than that, it's not like... I'm comparing this card more with Assassin's Blade than I am with True Silver. That should give you a sense of the value of this card. Not that it's going to be closer to Assassin's Blade than True Silver, but it's just nowhere near True Silver because it's off curve. And it also doesn't heal, so you're taking 2 more face damage each hit. So yeah, it's a good card, right? It's a good card, especially in a class without a lot of weapons, but it's not an insanely good card. We're going to end on that. Shaman, absolutely amazing. One of the things you may wonder is, I'm going over these cards, right? And if you're like kind of listening to how I'm talking about these cards, you'll end up with the conclusion that Shaman doesn't have the best cards in Whispers of the Old Gods. It has definitely top tier cards, but its cards aren't necessarily better as a whole than cards from other classes we're going to talk about. Like when we get to Warrior, you're going to hear me like go crazy over it, right? Like Rogue, I'm going to go a bit crazy over that. But Shaman has very, very good cards, and more importantly, Shaman had very bad LOE cards. So you're replacing a lot more than you do with some of these other classes. Like when I'm evaluating Warrior, I have to also think, well, you know, Monkey and Obsidian Destroyer are each getting offered 33% less. That's a pretty big deal. With Shaman, we're not only looking at lack of good cards that get offered less, we're looking at bad cards getting offered less. So it's a natural increase in the class's goodness without Whispers of the Old Gods having done anything. And then you look how the overall meta is going to shift towards the Shaman. It's going to be a big rise. Now, that's not to say Shaman's going to be a good class, because we ranked it as the 3rd to last class, right? As in the bottom tier of classes, because it's not in a good place in LOE or TGT. Especially LOE. It was in a pretty bad place in LOE. So this can probably bring Shaman into the middle, I would say, of the class hierarchy. It's not quite going to bring Shaman back into one of like the top 3 classes the way it was in Classic. But still, that's good. That's good to see, right? Blizzard has... We talked about Hunter already and how it's like the worst class now. Priest is not going to fare all that much better, but at least they did something with Shaman. So 1 out of 3, right? Try better next time. Maybe get 2 out of 3. Well, I guess they're still helping the Warrior, so maybe of the in danger classes, maybe it was 2 out of 4. But hey, take what you can get. Right now, Shaman is being lifted up by Blizzard, and we should all enjoy seeing it back in the meta. This is ADWCTA. These are our patrons. See you guys next time for... Let's do Rogue. Let's do Rogue next.